Esports are kind of a big deal. Over the last decade, we've seen a ton of games try and break into that competitive space, but reaching the upper echelon of esports does not come easy. Despite their best efforts, developers and publishers have done very little in the way of dethroning the kings of esports like Counter-Strike, Dota, and League of Legends. Blizzard are desperately trying to relive their StarCraft glory days, but the money and artificial interest pumped into the Overwatch League, it feels like a bubble that's waiting to burst. It's clear there's big business to capitalize on, but many have yet to ask themselves a very important question. What makes your esport fun to watch? After all, regardless of how balanced or competitive a game is, it doesn't really mean anything if it's not entertaining. The latest contender in the arena is Riot's Valorant, a shameless Counter-Strike clone with abilities. Like Siege before it, the 5-on-5 bomb defusal is spiced up with named characters in order to sell more merchandise and generate more cosplay and fan art. It makes me sick just thinking about it. It's genius. The game itself is a lot of fun and is built upon a rock-solid technical foundation, aiming for super high frame rates, server tick rates, and security access levels. Cheater ban rates. Basically, Valorant was made for competitive play, and the no-frills graphics make that clear from the start. But in order to be the next big esport, Valorant must be more than just balanced. It has to be fun to watch. Take a look at the world's most popular traditional sports, and you'll notice one thing they all have in common: balls. Also, they're all viewed from like this not quite overhead isometric view. Does it remind you of any other games? While the third dimension certainly plays a part in all of these sports, most of the action is firmly planted on the ground. This means that the game is extremely readable and all of the action is in view. In other words, you're not going to miss anything or be confused as to what's happening. The limitless nature of video games means that you're going to have alien gas farmers off-screen in StarCraft, but nobody cares. Kills or outplays are occasionally missed in Dota, but that's what instant replay was made for. To my knowledge, though, there isn't a sport that is broadcast in the first-person perspective. So why is CSGO so popular if it's not an easy breezy viewing experience? Like those traditional sports I mentioned, the third dimension definitely exists on Dust 2, but for the most part, CSGO is a fairly flat game, especially compared to the high-flying adventures of Overwatch. I don't think I need to explain this one too much. Come on, just look at this cluster of explosions and particles. The camera is usually pulled back to a more traditional sports view, but the action is still really hard to follow. There's hardly any build-up to ultimates, which are used several times each match, and every player is doing something totally different, unlike Counter-Strike. The same is true for Valorant, which plays things very close to the ground or right above a player's head. The health, hitboxes, and speed of each agent is the same across the board, and the abilities function more like smokes and flashbangs than black holes and nukes. Seeing as how similar Valorant is to CS, I don't see the first-person perspective being an issue like it is for other games. It's safe to say Valorant esports passes this test. Competitive games typically have really high skill ceilings, but not all esports are created equal. There's a point in some competitive activities where the only exciting thing to happen or highlight-worthy moment is when a world record is broken. The Olympics is a grand display of athleticism and an ethical dumpster, but there's a reason that they only have it every 4 years. Most people aren't interested in watching bobsledding or track and field every week. Don't get me wrong, track and field events are fun to watch, but because they're designed around how fast you can run or how high you can jump, there is a limit to that entertainment value. Most people tune in to see if their country comes out on top or to watch the fast man go zoom. Records get broken, people cheer, and we forget about it a week later, just like the Olympic Committee forgets about the economic and environmental havoc they created. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is there's no visible creativity in running or pole vaulting. There's an agreed upon way to do it, everyone does it pretty much the same, some better than others. The reason many games die or never catch on as an esport is because they lack creativity. This is why, other than the totally without controversy NASCAR iRacing, racing games and their ilk aren't popular esports. There is a reason Super Smash Bros. Melee is still super popular and why pros haven't moved on. The amount of freedom players have is unprecedented, even compared to other fighting games. No two pros play the same, and it's that level of freedom that makes Melee so fun to watch. The creativity we've seen from these early days of Valorant make it clear that the game has a huge potential for player expression and wild plays. The synergy of abilities and discovery of new techniques mean that each round will play out differently. Teams thought to be worse than another will come out on top due to their creativity, and the abilities mean that the game is less about who clicks heads better. I'm very excited to see the future of Valorant and what players come up with. When talking about meta these days, it's easy to conflate updates with a change in the meta of a game. While changes to balance absolutely shift the meta, they're not required if the game has a lot of depth. Let's take Dota 2 for example. Updates can come quickly and sporadically, but IceFrog lets one patch in particular marinate for months, the International Patch. A few months before the greatest esport of all time, the Frog will release a patch that will seemingly be deconstructed and solved before TI even begins. But something amazing happens during the 2-week event, even down to the last couple days. The meta will completely shift due to the fiery competition and millions on the line. Heroes thought to be must picks won't even be considered, and the finalists will reveal their trap card to everyone's delight.
Tackies! Oh, there we go.
The meta shifted like 15 times over the course of a couple months with no balance changes, and that is why Dota is the greatest video game of all time. That is, if Melee didn't exist. I won't get into it too much, but let's just say this game came out 20 years ago with no patches, and the meta continues to change. Albeit fairly small these days, you still see things like Axe winning a major with Pikachu. The depth of a game is directly related to how many times a meta can shift on a single patch. And the jury is still out on Valorant. The game is deep, no doubt, but it's still way too early to say how the meta will play out and how it will affect the viewing experience. If there is a team comp that is hands down the best, and months of professional play makes no dent in that combination of characters, we're looking at another Overwatch GOATS or dive situation. To clarify though, I don't think having a set meta is bad for some games. Valorant's closest relative CS doesn't drastically change all that often, and it's still a fun game to watch. But that's because the meta is rarely annoying to watch. For a game with different heroes to pick, however, seeing diversity is really important. Hopefully I don't look back on this video and get really sad. Aside from having one of the worst spectating experiences related to my first point on perspective, Battle Royales are the most anticlimactic esports despite what you might think. Apex, Fortnite, PUBG, all of these games follow a similar format of points, tallying up from kills and placement. A series of matches are played, the officials tally up the points, and the winner is revealed sometimes minutes after the final game has been played. Sometimes it's obvious who won, and most of the time it's a team that placed first a couple times and got a decent amount of kills, but sometimes it's not so obvious and you have to sit there waiting to see who won. The problem with that is that there's rarely any rising action or climax.
Back and forth, and it might come down to a heel-off. T-Chubb dropping down those campfires. We'll see here, Crew following it all the way in, and T-Chubb goes down. Crew with the victory royale.
Crew with 7 eliminations and the victory royale. The monster performance at the end of it. That could have just secured him hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even over $1 million by just that game right there with how he does.
The greatest moments in esports are those that deal with everything being on the line. The all-or-nothing last game at the World Finals in League or Dota is so intense and heart-racing. Match point in a close CSGO final is the pinnacle of performance and viewer engagement. The fact that you can have the winner of the last match in a BR tournament get 3rd or 4th place is just not a good viewing experience. A team could win the whole thing after doing terrible in the last match, just because they had a big enough point lead. And I don't care if that's technically the most fair way or best way to determine who should win, it sucks as a viewer. I love Apex Legends, but I couldn't care less about its pro scene because of the format. Make it all about kills or all about placement. The bottom 5 teams of each round get eliminated until there are 5 teams left in the final showdown. Something like that. Things like gymnastics or ice skating aren't very popular spectator sports because there is no climax or clutch moments. They perform, they get a score, and wait to see if someone else does better. Video games can very easily fall into this trap because the possibilities are endless. Battle Royale isn't really something you could do in real life in the same way you can in a game, but that doesn't mean it's going to make for a good esport. Overwatch's push or capture faster than the enemy did last round style of competition is another example of dampening hype. There are no from behind or crazy comebacks unless you just look at they were down and how many maps they had won. Valorant, on the other hand, is ripe for hype. The comebacks, the clutch plays, the final moments of stress and excitement are there for the player and viewer. Valorant isn't over till it's over. Basically, if you've watched CSGO, you know it's going to be filled with awesome moments and close victories. This is the final key to making a fun esports viewing experience. Overall, I think Valorant will be a very fun spectator sport. All of these elements get me invested in watching, and it's important to think outside of what the hardcore audience really cares about to create a fun and entertaining game for everyone to watch. I trash talked a few games in this video, and plenty of people like watching those games played competitively, but the true test of an esports success is, without a doubt, who the audience is. When that audience only consists of your most hardcore, competitive, rank grinding players, there's a problem. I almost never play CSGO, and I only occasionally play Dota these days, but I regularly tune in to see a pro game just on a random Sunday. I have no idea how Tekken works, but damn if it isn't hype to watch. I mean, it's 2 dudes or ladies punching each other. It's just entertaining. And I haven't played Smash, Melee, or Ultimate in months, but I regularly watch the competitive matches. I think Valorant will be a very similar game where a lot of casual players will tune in to watch the matches because they're exciting and it's easy to watch, and there'll be tons of clutch plays. So here's hoping Riot doesn't screw up the balance, I guess.